Should Valve be worried about the Nintendo Switch too? And GameStop has finally learned that the Steam Deck exists. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Deck Ready. I hope you had a great weekend. I spent a ton of time playing Diablo 4 on my Steam Deck at the park connected to my phone's wireless hotspot, and it was actually an awesome experience. Make sure you let me know what you were playing down in the comments below. All right, so the first thing I wanted to talk about today is a new leak we got about the Nintendo Switch 2, which normally I wouldn't really talk about, but it seems like one that's actually worth paying attention to. So there's a developer called MercurySteam who kind of has the coolest trajectory ever. They made a 2D, 3D style Castlevania game back in the day for 3DS, and then they immediately moved on to Metroid Samus Returns, and then that got them the part for Metroid Dread, which if you've never played Metroid Dread, I'm not going to tell you that it runs really well on the Steam Deck. I'm just not going to say it, but it is definitely an awesome experience that feels like the Metroid games I was getting on the Game Boy Advance between Zero Mission and Metroid Fusion back when I was a kid. I cannot recommend that game enough, and the Emmy robot is absolutely terrifying. And the reason I bring them up is because a leaker who's apparently pretty trustworthy is letting us know that that developer has a Nintendo Switch 2 dev kit in their studio and that they're working on a sequel to Metroid Dread. Now, first off, I'm really excited that Metroid Dread is getting a sequel. I'm glad that that game sold well enough for Nintendo to actually greenlight a sequel to it because, you know, Metroid, if you look at all of the other Nintendo franchises, I think Metroid is probably like one of the weaker ones in terms of sales. I'm just glad we're gonna get more Metroid because it seems like it's actually finally catching on with people between Metroid Prime Remastered and of course Metroid Dread. So that's cool all on its own. But because a developer already has the Nintendo Switch 2 in hand, that basically lets us know the timeline for when this thing is going to be released, which people seem to think is going to be very similar to how the Nintendo Switch was announced and released, which means it's going to be announced around the end of 2023 and then released early next year. And honestly, that timeline makes a lot of sense. It's been over a year since we got the Nintendo Switch OLED. The Nintendo Switch is looking a little long in the tooth at this point. And even though that OLED screen is great, games are kind of struggling to run on the Nintendo Switch. So the timing could not be better for a successor to this console. And from every rumor we've heard, it looks like it's going to be a full-on sequel to the Switch, right? It's going to be a tablet that has clip-on controllers, and the controllers for this one look like they're actually going to be like the Pro controller for the Nintendo Switch, split in half, so it's going to be a more hardcore gaming device. And naturally, since this channel is called Deck Ready, the big question that comes up is, should Valve be worried about a potential Nintendo Switch? And look, I'm just gonna be real with you guys. I don't think Valve really needs to be worried because these consoles are aimed at two different audiences. Like, one is made for people who have a huge Steam library and want to take advantage of that on the go, and the other is for Nintendo fans who don't want to take advantage of a huge Steam library and don't want to work on emulating their games on the Steam Deck, because even though it is a relatively easy process, it's not as easy as buying a Nintendo Switch and just popping a game cartridge into the console. Like, these things are aimed at two different audiences, and that's fine. There are just some technological things that I think are worth looking at over on the Nintendo Switch side that make me wish we had those features on the Steam Deck. The biggest one of those is the fact that no matter which Nintendo Switch you buy, whether it's the launch model, the red box model, the Lite, or the OLED, all of those are using an NVIDIA chip, and it's like a modified NVIDIA mobile chip, but it looks like whatever this Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be is going to use a much more beefed up NVIDIA chip that will be able to take advantage of DLSS. Now, say what you will about FSR, I like it. I think FSR 2.2 is pretty good. I wouldn't call it great, and I definitely wouldn't call it amazing. It is just good. You know, it upscales the game from a lower resolution. It does a decent job, and we have seen a lot of games lately that use it actually implement it super well. Like Diablo 4, for example, I play on my Rog Ally and my Steam Deck and my main gaming PC. My main gaming PC uses DLSS, and it's the one game where I really can't tell the difference between DLSS on that and FSR on my Steam Deck, my Ally, and my PS5. But with all that being said, I don't think anyone's gonna sit here and argue that FSR is anywhere close to as good or better than DLSS. And knowing that the Nintendo Switch 2 will probably continue on with using an NVIDIA chip, because Nintendo's recently talked about this console having backwards compatibility with Nintendo Switch games through your Nintendo account, I think this thing really could have DLSS. But the one thing that I think could hold it back is the fact that Nintendo always wants to make their consoles as affordable as possible, right? Like making the Switch like $300, getting the Switch Lite out pretty soon after release. Even the Switch OLED is not that expensive compared to a lot lot of its competition. So keeping that in mind, I don't think this console is going to use the latest NVIDIA tech. I could see it maybe using a laptop chip versus a phone chip, but I don't think this console is going to implement DLSS 3.0. So it's not like these rumors we've been hearing for the longest time now, where this new Switch is going to be able to do 4K graphics at 60 FPS. I don't think that's really going to end up happening. I think we're going to get the 2.0 version of DLSS on this device, and that's going to help us get like 1080p at 60 FPS, or even a locked 1080p and a locked 30 FPS. And then the best example of that I've got is Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. If they were able to release a version of that game that just runs at a high resolution and keeps that frame rate locked at 30 FPS, I think that would be more than good enough for people to maybe upgrade to the Switch 2 version of that game. Because while yeah, they are saying there's going to be backwards compatibility, I think there will be a split between Switch games and Switch 2 games where they're going to make you buy a new version of the game to get those small upgrades that'll come along with this new version, like you see with stuff like Ghost of Tsushima's Director's Cut over on the PS5. And all this is kind of coming to a point here where if this thing is able to use DLSS, I could see its screen actually keeping the OLED and actually being 1080p instead of 720p, which would put it in the realm of the ROG Ally instead of the Steam Deck. Now, me personally, I think the Steam Deck screen is fine. I think it's going to get even better when SteamOS 3.5 comes out eventually, and we're able to mess with the vibrance of the screen like we are with Vibrant Deck. I think all of that's going to be great for the console. But now that my ROG Ally has the 322 BIOS and they seem to kind of even out performance and get them just a little bit closer to where they were at 317, and they also come along with a lot of fixes for crashing in games. They improve battery life a little bit, they improve the fan curve so your SD card's not going to get fried. I do see the difference between the Steam Deck screen and the ROG Ally's screen. And when I play Diablo 4, it's hard not to think about playing on the ROG Ally because even though you run the game at 720p, it has 60 FPS locked, which is great. I would really love to keep the screen at 1080p and then use RSR, but for some reason you have no resolution control in Diablo 4. I think it's because there's no full screen mode, but whatever the reason is, you can't change the resolution in the game. So even if you set the screen to 1080p, turn on RSR and that quick access menu equivalent that they have, it's not going to do anything because you're still running the game at 1080p. You have to actually switch it to 720p. But one thing that's different now about the gaming landscape versus when the Nintendo Switch originally came out is that there are a lot more handhelds on the market for it to compete with. The Vita was still out at that time, but like I don't think the Vita was ever competing with the Nintendo Switch. But now the Nintendo Switch 2 has both the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck to go up against, and there's a bunch of other handheld PCs out there that run games super well. But I still don't really think Valve has to do much here because these consoles are going to find different audiences. At the end of the day, I think Valve's Steam Deck is taking the place of the PlayStation Vita and the PSP in the sense that it can play full-on console PS4 and PS5 games like Spider-Man Remastered and Spider-Man Miles Morales, but it can also take advantage of pretty much any indie game that you throw at it. So any hardcore game you really want to play on a handheld, you will be able to play that on a Steam Deck, and then Nintendo will just keep doing what Nintendo's always done, which is put out a ton of great first-party games throughout the year and rely on those. I could see the indie directs kind of drying up a little bit and that kind of focus moving over to the Steam Deck because I think the Steam Deck's going to run those games a lot better and kind of pull that audience over. But what people are buying a Nintendo console for is Nintendo games. So if Nintendo is putting out Nintendo games over there, I think people are going to go buy that console, have that in addition to their Steam Deck, and everything in the world will be happy. And if this thing does come out and uses DLSS, I think that's good overall because it makes more competition between NVIDIA and AMD, and it gives AMD more of an incentive to improve FSR and get it on the level of DLSS. I really hope they can, because having stuff like frame generation with DLSS 3.0 basically means you can use a gaming laptop as a desktop grade computer, and I've been saving up my money ever since I heard about that for a 40 series laptop because I'm just a laptop gamer. I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, I really started thinking about this because lately I've been playing a ton of Nintendo Switch and I've actually been enjoying it quite a lot because the current Nintendo Switch targets 30 FPS. And with the way games have been coming out on PC lately, the Steam Deck has really become a 30 FPS console for me as well, and I have equal amounts of fun on both devices. I've been playing Pokemon Legends Arceus on my Switch OLED, and I've been playing Diablo 4 on the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally and the PS5, and no matter what console I'm playing on, I've been having a great time. Next up here, let's talk about how GameStop has finally acknowledged the Steam Deck. So obviously Valve is kind of the roadblock there on being able to buy the Steam Deck in other stores and even other countries. Australia was the big roadblock for a really long time, and there are still other countries around the world where you're not able to buy a Steam Deck. So that's why you can't walk into a Best Buy and buy a Steam Deck like you can with the ROG Ally. But one one place I was honestly kind of surprised to not see used Steam Decks showing up was obviously
GameStop.
Because for a while now, you've been able to get anything used at GameStop, whether you're talking Apple products, old cell phones, old consoles, pretty much anything you can think of, GameStop is selling used because that's 100% profit for them. And it looks like that's about to change if a leaked flyer is to be believed. So yeah, this is a GameStop flyer that says introducing the Steam Deck, and then it actually lists out prices for refurbished models in all three categories. So the 64GB model is going to be $319.99, the 256GB model is going to be $429.99, and the 512GB model is going to be $518.99. And because it's GameStop, they have all of the different accessories you'll need, like a micro SD card and a dock at the bottom of the sheet, so that they can tell their employees to upsell people when they're buying a refurbished Steam Deck. Now this is kind of crazy, but I've actually bought quite a few refurbished consoles over the years from GameStop because my parents bought me a Wii for Christmas the year it came out. And as much as I liked the Wii at the time, all of my friends had an Xbox 360. So the summer that Halo 3 came out, I mowed a lot of lawns because my grandma actually let me pre-order Halo 3 when we were out one day, and I had the game for quite a few months, but no 360. So I mowed a lot of lawns. I got the core model from GameStop refurbished, and it lasted a couple years before it got red rings. And then I was actually able to take advantage of Microsoft repairing it, and then it eventually got red rings again, which, like, you know, that's a different situation. But yeah, I bought that refurbished console and I had a good experience with it. I also bought a refurbished PlayStation 3 with Christmas money one year, and that was a great experience too. It was a launch model. The Blu-ray laser on that one did eventually break, but it took like 3 or 4 years for that to happen, so I'm not going to hold that against GameStop. And then I also bought a refurbished Nintendo 3DS XL because I really wanted that black and gold Zelda one, and they just had one available and there was a good deal at the time. So I've never really had an issue with refurbished consoles from GameStop. I will say that the Steam Deck is a little bit more fragile than a lot of the other consoles out there, and because it's a PC, it's running hot a lot of the time, and you don't know if someone actually broke it open to increase the SSD size or change out the thumbsticks or do a bunch of different little things that a GameStop refurbisher might not notice. So while yes, these prices are pretty good for the Steam Deck, I think it might be worth waiting to see if anyone actually grabs these and posts on the subreddit, and then if you hear of any problems, maybe just wait for the Steam sale. Because as time has gone on, the discount has gone from 10% across the board with the last sale to this summer sale having like a tiered discount that gives you more off depending on which Steam Deck you buy. And as good as the refurbished warranty might be at GameStop, I still trust Valve's warranty over theirs. And then the last news story I have for you guys today is that a big crisis has been averted with the hottest new game on Steam, Paddleberry Mass. Now I didn't actually realize this was an early access game, but it doesn't seem like it's having much trouble at all because it runs on pretty much anything. If you look at the graphics, it's kind of easy to see why, but this game is kind of taking over Steam in the face of Battlefield 2042. It looks super fun, but the reason I've kind of held out on getting it is because it wasn't clear on whether or not the anti-cheat that the game is going to implement would be working right on the Steam Deck. So while it was playable at launch, people were kind of waiting to see if the anti-cheat would get them banned or not, and it looks like now we don't have to worry anymore because this game is going to use a new version of Faceit anti-cheat that's going to support Linux and the Steam Deck. This is obviously awesome to see, especially because this is an early access game, and it's nice to see a game come out at launch and not only work for the Steam Deck, but have a defense in place for anti-cheat that's not going to allow Linux gamers to take advantage of a multiplayer game on the device, especially when it's a game that runs as well as BattleBit does on the Steam Deck. What I really hope for though is that other publishers take note of this happening and kind of make their games work out of the gate on the Steam Deck, because that is one of the biggest reasons to buy the ROG Ally. Despite the fact that there are some hiccups with the hardware and the battery life is nothing great, being able to run the newest games like Destiny 2, for example, on that thing without any issue is a huge draw for people on top of the increased performance. So that's why I'm hoping that other publishers do take note and maybe kind of keep an eye on this Faceit anti-cheat, because this could become the standard going forward, right? Like if it works super well, it doesn't affect performance, and it stops cheaters from infesting the game, you could see other publishers kind of paying attention and using that at launch instead of moving their game over to it or using BattlEye or one of these other anti-cheat systems that do work on the Steam Deck. But yeah, if you're as addicted to BattleBit Remastered as everyone else seems to be, and you wanted to play it on your Steam Deck but you're worried about getting banned, fear not, you're not going to get in trouble for playing this game. Anyway guys, that's all I got for you today. Make sure you let me know what you think down in the comments below. Remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.